Thank you so much for joining us. We're just a few months away now from midterm congressional elections that will determine partisan control of Congress and set the stage for the next 2 years. While Massachusetts seems likely to remain a blue state, the outcome nationally very much in doubt. Here to help us make sense of it all is one of the city's sharpest political minds, Scott Ferson, a veteran political activist and consultant as CEO of the Liberty Square Group, and he's the author of How the Democrats Lost America, Making Sense of the 2024 Election and the Future of American Politics. Scott, congratulations on the book. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
In 2024, to bring it back to the local area, Fall River, the city of Fall River, went for the Republican presidential candidate, Donald J. Trump, for the first time in 100 years. That's pretty significant. What happened?
Yeah, well, I think it's a nostalgia for Calvin Coolidge, maybe, the last time they voted for the... but I see it. I mean, this is what, in traveling around to the 34 states over 8 years, I think Democrats are sort of missing this phenomenon where you think Massachusetts is solidly blue, but when you look at Fall River, a place I went to college at, you know, it's a different place, and I think Democrats are sort of missing the boat. If you live in Rhode Island, in a state that can't see the ocean, it voted for Donald Trump. So even in deep blue parts of the country, there are very significant red pockets.
Former Congressman Joe Kennedy, I talked to him right after that and asked him for some insight. He said he remembered visiting a textile plant, small manufacturing plant in Fall River that had been resurrected from the ashes. And they had a sign in the main hall of the plant that said NAFTA on it, the North American Free Trade Agreement, now rebranded into something else with a big X over it. What does that tell us about how the Trump base came together?
I think that's exactly it. I mean, I was out in Little Rock, Arkansas at the Clinton Library, where it's situated next to a rusted bridge over the Arkansas River, which I thought was sort of a perfect metaphor for NAFTA. NAFTA lifted up the world. It lifted up the United States economy and its relation with the world, but it hollowed out a lot of towns. And I think Democrats sort of declared, still to this day, look nostalgically on what Bill Clinton was able to do quite well, without understanding that there needed to be a follow-on step to address where the job shifts were going to take place and where people were going to be left out and left behind. I was in Canton, Ohio, came back and was talking to a member of Congress, and I said, I think the Democratic message to people in Canton is, you should move. And he said, maybe they should. And I think that's the Democrats' message to places like Fall River, or large swaths of red in this country, is that if there's nothing there for you, jobs are being created on the coasts, and you should move there. And that's not the way it works. And I think Democrats need to recognize that.
Well, at one point in the book, let me just find the quote here, you say, Trump has figured out what people want, and he tells them what they want to hear. The Democrats don't need to figure out what people want to hear. The Democrats need to listen to what people want. What do you mean by that?
So I mean that you know, Democrats right now can be baffled by people in parts of this country that voted for Donald Trump thinking that they voted against their economic interest. Well, I vote against my economic interest all the time. But I'm virtuous if I do so, and they're stupid, apparently. And we have to get out of that mindset. And rather than tell people what they want, you want access to health care, you want, you know, whatever it might be that's a Democratic platform, I think we need to, as I did, listen to what people want, which isn't very much different, but the delivery is in a very different situation. You can take Medicaid away from people, but if people in this country don't have access to primary care, just as a place to get to, does it really materially matter to them? Or you can take SNAP benefits away, and without addressing the fact that, you know, 42 million people in this country get SNAP benefits. How did that happen? And I think the Democrats, that's what people are feeling, and people will take a false promise over nothing every time. And if Democrats don't offer a real solution or real contrast to what Donald Trump is, people are going to vote for that.
But we got to take a break here, but just briefly, How's a politician supposed to do what you're saying when what people say is often so contradictory? I like my neighbor, the immigrant, but I don't like immigrants. We want more affordable housing so my kids can stay where they were raised, but not in my backyard, and so on.
So I think you have to listen. I didn't have, when people, Democrats tend to conflate certain issues as well, the border and immigration. And when you're at the border, and not a lot of people from here have been sort of down to the southern border, you see that they're two very distinct things. They're the border, and securing the border is something that people wanted. I didn't find anybody, I know there are people out there who want to limit immigration in this country, but that's not the way people presented it to me. They wanted the border secure. I think what they would like is a rational set of rules for immigration into this country, and Democrats aren't providing that. I have no idea what the Democratic immigration policy is, except the Republicans killed it.
Right.
But I think people out there would sort of, they see their neighbor. Arkansas, Nevada, other places I've been to understand migrant work. It's central to the economy. But they would like somebody to explain what a rational program is.
Yeah. Wow. So, Scott, you're talking about how Democrats need to do a much better job of listening to people. Wasn't the party listening to Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents in Maine when it nominated Graham Plattner?
It was. I mean, I spent a fair amount of time in Maine, and the crowds that Plattner was getting were just crazy for Maine. Usually you get a dozen people in a room for a candidate, and to get his numbers, he was connecting. And I think there's frustration in Maine now that two things can be true. He was personally disqualified for being a senator, but he wasn't wrong in terms of what he was saying. I was listening to two people in Akron, Ohio, one who said, he's got this Nazi tattoo, and the other gentleman he was talking to said, I'm not looking at his chest, I'm listening to his words. And a lot of people are listening to Graham Plattner's words, or Mayor Mamdani, for instance, in that respect. And a lot of Democrats aren't, and a lot of Democrat elites in power aren't, and that's a mistake. You shouldn't throw Plattner's message out with Plattner. And it's a lesson, I'm afraid, we'll see whether we learn it in Maine.
A big part of Plattner's message and Mamdani's in New York these days is boo Israel. Netanyahu comes into town, I'm going to have him arrested. Yeah. And a lot of sort of little incidents that have many Jews within the Democratic Party feeling like, hey, you're demonizing us. Do you believe that's happening? And with what consequence to the Democrats' political prospects? Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a style of both Mamdani and Plattner that resonates with the Trump voters that I talked to around the country. But I think ultimately, if you sort of scratch the surface a little bit, most people around the country think that, New York City might as well be Mars. So I don't know that particularly resonates. I don't, a lot of people, to the extent that in the book, to the extent that Gaza came up at the time before the election, it was more that it was kind of college protests about it. Most people didn't, it seemed very foreign to them in terms of, or sort of an elitist kind of debate, and not central to. I mean, right now I'm not hearing a lot from Trump voters about Iran, for instance. If there's disappointment in the Trump voters I'm talking to now around the country, it's that he didn't do what he said he was going to do. They were hoping Doge would be more successful, that there would be a fundamental change in government, and that didn't happen. And frankly, I think that might be an opening for Democrats.
Has the Trump phenomenon run its course?
So I think yes and no. Trump, yes. The phenomenon, no. I mean, most people I talked to, I consciously didn't say, what do you think about Donald Trump as lead? I just let people talk. And people weren't talking about Donald Trump, even before the election, or Joe Biden. They were talking about housing came up all the time. Housing came up, prices of things. I think this is a fundamental problem that the Democrats have now, right? Prices are too high, gas and groceries. Things are unaffordable. Can't afford housing and health care. The Democrats take those two very different things. One goes up and down, and one is systemic. We put it through the looking glass in Washington, and it comes out affordability. a word that doesn't really mean anything to the people I'm talking to.
Really?
And that's so the Trump phenomenon lives in that this is going to be a change election in 26. And the change will be for Democrats, I think, in the House. But if change doesn't happen, they're going to vote for change again in 28.
So, and just to wrap it up here, because our time's just about up. So when you see Trump mocking the term affordability, and then they come to the pundits, and the pundits saying, look at that, he's just digging his grave even deeper. Mm-hmm. You see something different. You see Trump maybe echoing what he's hearing from voters, which is they think that's a ridiculous term, or that term doesn't resonate for them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a little exotic, right? Has anyone said to you, John, I have an affordability problem? People don't talk that way.
Well, people will say, I can't afford to go out to eat anymore.
I can't afford to go out to eat.
Yeah.
That's a very specific thing.
Okay.
And we've sort of put a Washington spin on it.
So it becomes its own universe. Yeah,
it's like
very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, if you could sum it up in one sentence, what's your elevator pitch to the Democratic Party?
Get out of D.C. and listen to people. Don't talk at them.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
Wow. Scott Ferson, appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Good luck with your book. It is entitled How the Democrats Lost America, Making Sense of the 2024 Election and the Future of American Politics.